We'll now move on to motions. We will now debate the two motions that are listed on the order paper. The first motion for debate is the Green motion on improving temporary accommodation for Lambeth residents. The speaking order is as listed on the order paper. Councillor Pete Elliott, you have 5 minutes to open the debate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Labour Party on its website proudly talks of its history. The Labour Party has always been about people. It was formed to give ordinary people a voice and sought power in order to improve their lives. The fruits of this work have changed Britain for the better through the most progressive governments in our country's history. As we heard earlier from Davida, the administration in Lambeth is currently failing those ordinary families who need most support. There is no genuine strategy or plans in Lambeth to address the housing problems faced by around 7,000 people in temporary accommodation. The Green Party in Lambeth is a party giving those in temporary accommodation a voice, and we want to work with the administration to solve their problems. Successive governments before and after the Second World War delivered a great number of high-quality homes for ordinary people, and we can see evidence of this all over Lambeth. Lambeth's homes were designed by some of the top architects in the country, including women such as Rosemary Sternstedt and Kate McIntosh. Thousands of those council homes have been sold off in Lambeth under right to buy or at auction. Many others have been handed over to housing associations to manage. Some were taken from short-life tenants under dreadful circumstances and are now making private property owners a small fortune. The demographics of communities living on estates that have been demolished and rebuilt have been transformed beyond recognition, as high rents and private sales have rendered new homes unaffordable and forcing ordinary people away from their homes and support networks. We need to stop making excuses and blaming others. Lambeth's 2017 housing strategy expired last year. The homelessness and rough street sleeping strategy and plan written in 2019 has some good ideas and recognises many of the challenges faced by those in TA, but it does not show a roadmap to eliminate temporary accommodation. There are fine words in the strategy about working to support people who are disconnected from family, friends and community due to housing disruption. The lived experience, though, from people such as Davida and many others who have called on us over the last few years, is that there is a lot to be improved in that support offering. In Lambeth's homelessness strategy, it even states temporary accommodation in general can be associated with poor health and well-being. Yet there is no aspiration to reduce or eliminate it. The homelessness prevention team has been busy and has undoubtedly prevented the numbers of families in TA from being worse. Despite their efforts, we have steadily increased the numbers of families in TA from 1,200 in 2012 to 2,800 now. During this time, the council housing stock has steadily decreased. With COVID support measures coming to an end, we will almost certainly see demand continuing on the same trajectory. We share the concerns of individuals and groups who believe that there are human rights and equalities questions that urgently need an understanding and addressing with regards to TA in Lambeth, not least the rights of children. We look forward to working with Councillor Kay, the new Cabinet Member for Housing, and with Lee Giorgio, who has made a positive start so far in his new role as the Assistant Director of Housing Needs. The miserable standards of temporary accommodation that we are putting our residents in is embarrassing and shameful. The fact that we are consciously putting families in overcrowded accommodation for years and calling it temporary accommodation is unforgivable in a borough where we are investing £1.9 billion of taxpayers' money in recklessly demolishing homes in a high-risk scheme similar to Croydon's Brick by Brick. If Homes for Lambeth surprises us and is successful, it will deliver around 60% of its homes for private sale. 15% of its homes are expected to be for so-called affordable housing, and only around 25% will be for council-level rents, barely replacing our stock of securely tenanted council homes with less secure homes at council-level rents in 20 years' time. This motion is aimed at highlighting many of the inequalities and problems with so-called temporary accommodation. It also suggests many positive ways of levelling up for those in TA, to put them on a more equal footing with ordinary people in the borough, and immediately reducing the numbers of people living in such debilitating insecurity. I'm sure that all of my colleagues will have been reached out to by desperate parents in temporary accommodation, so you will be able to relate to some of the problems. Some of you will have experienced temporary or insecure accommodation yourselves. With the cost of accommodation in the borough, all it takes is a couple of life-changing events and almost any one of us or our loved ones could end up needing housing support. By adopting the ideas in this motion, we will ensure that our housing support offering does not compound problems. Let us put together a plan that removes the inequalities and injustice in housing. We have local elections next year, and I'd like to see all of Lambeth's party's manifestos stating that they will work to eliminate temporary accommodation in its current form in Lambeth. I urge you to vote for our motion. Thank you very much.
Councillor Mohashi, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Today I will be Councillor Maria Kay. This topic is really close to my heart. When I moved to this country at age 6, I lived in temporary accommodation and moved twice before we eventually got a council house in Mitesfield 5 years later. This motion states the need for various reports, fact-finding missions and commissions so that we can understand the impact of TA on black people like me. Perhaps if all our Labour councillors were white middle-class homeowners with the shallow roots in the community like the party opposite, we would need to do everything that they asked to understand the impact of living in TA in our communities. But as a black woman who grew up age 6 in this borough, first in TA, then in council estates, and for who many of my neighbours and friends also grew up in TA, I don't think I need a lecture from the party opposite on the impact of growing up in temporary accommodation and how important council home is. For me, those 2,800 households aren't just an abstract number. They're 2,800 families like me, my mum and my stepdad. They were people who lived round the corner and, like us, other Ugandans who moved here at the same time. But at the same time, I know it was the offer of a council property that met our needs, which meant we were finally able to find a permanent place that we could call home. There is a housing crisis in London. We have a massive shortage of affordable housing. Because of this, we need to be realistic that permanent is not often possible from the outset, and is why, to ensure families have a safe, warm and dry roof over their head, the council has to place them in TA. This is why this motion and the commitments made within simply do not make sense. The level of disconnect between this motion, the commitments proposed within it, and the Green Party's position on council housing buildings in Lambeth and beyond is unbelievable and frankly a little shameful. For the opposition to suggest that changing the job description of the Director of Housing would end TA in Lambeth within 6 years shows how little they actually understand about what thousands of Lambeth residents are facing. I'd love to be able to end the use of TA within 6 years, but without the ready supply of several thousand new council homes, it simply isn't deliverable. Even if they were to build on every corner of the borough, delivering these homes would take a lot more than 6 years to do. It is easy to make false promises when you have no prospect or desire of being able to deliver them. I became a councillor to make a difference for the most vulnerable residents and will do everything I can to deliver for them. But making pious, undeliverable statements has never housed anyone in history. If the Greens really want to deliver for our residents in TA, then perhaps they should stop politically point scoring against our delivery plan. Where responsible councils look to either build entire estates or infill existing estates to relieve the pressure that the housing crisis is having in London, Greens seem to oppose any such methods. They aren't interested in taking action. If it's not for biodiversity reasons, it's for the loss of space in infill projects. If it's not for architectural heritage of the estates being rebuilt, if it's not for that, it's the carbon released in the atmosphere. Okay, colleagues, for those reasons, I urge you to vote against the motion.
Councillor Marcia Cameron, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Lambeth Housing Needs Service is under unprecedented pressure, as we all know. The coronavirus pandemic has put a massive strain on the council housing needs service, and the hard-working staff in the team have been working in a highly pressured environment with seemingly ever-increasing workloads over the last year. The service has seen a 23% increase in the demand in the last year and an 11% increase in the number of applicants placed into temporary accommodation. In the year from March 2020 to March 2021, the Council prevented the homelessness of over 1,600 families, the second highest number in London and our highest on record. And we are still experiencing a level of demand which is higher than the normal, and that is only going to increase with the end of the eviction ban lifted and the furlough scheme coming to an end. There are several other points which I think are important to note too, particularly in the context of this motion and its complete absence of any substantive solution to the housing crisis that is afflicting Lambeth and London as a whole. The increased demand has placed an additional 1.8 million pressure on our budget. Discretionary housing benefit grant from central government has been reduced by 50%, a loss of over 700k. The National Residential Landlord Association estimate that over 800,000 renters across England are in rent arrears, a frightening figure. With the furlough scheme ending at the end of September, there is a significant risk that unemployment levels will increase over the coming months. This will result in an increased number of households no longer able to meet their housing costs.
30 seconds.
The solution to these enormous challenges and to those that Councillor Ashley read out in his report are increasing supply of council housing, building more and better homes for Lambeth residents that deserve better than living in unsuitable, insecure and inefficient housing. It would have been great and no doubt something in which we in Lambeth Labour Group would support if the Green Party would focus their effort here on campaigning to keep the additional amount of universal credit, I'm rounding up, extending rights and protections for the renters for more support for Lambeth residents suffering because of lack of employment as a result of COVID, and more funding to local authorities to build council homes to house the homeless, rather than attacking the council for beginning its biggest council, housing building programme for generations. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Can I go now to Councillor Matthew Bennett? Matthew, you have 3 minutes.
There we go, we're done. Thanks very much, Madam Mayor, and can I say what a pleasure it is to follow Councillors Hashi on behalf of Councillor Kay and Councillor Cameron. I think probably many people will have been surprised this evening when they looked at the papers, or indeed before, that the Green Party has brought a motion on homelessness that doesn't mention building new homes. But it's barely been 2 weeks since Councillor Ainsley came to our Cabinet meeting and said, and I quote, "We don't have a housing crisis." That's why, we can play the video later if you like, that's why I assume that their solution to homelessness, to eliminate temporary accommodation in 6 years, isn't to build thousands of new homes for local families, but to, and I quote from their motion, insert new key performance indicators into the Director of Housing's job description. If it were that easy to solve homelessness, then you'd think they might have tried it in Green Run, Brighton, where 1 in every 78 residents is homeless. Homelessness is a scourge and it is serious, and it won't go away by changing its name. We've already heard tonight that almost 3,000 families are now provided with temporary accommodation by Lambeth Council. Every week the numbers go up, and there are over 30,000 now on our waiting list who are all assessed by need, and the need is too great. The answer to homelessness is to build more homes, not to tinker with KPIs and to pretend and claim that there's no housing crisis. And yes, as this Labour councillor strained every sinew to get building, setting up a not-for-profit house building company, recruiting staff, consulting residents, designing homes, securing planning permission, building homes, handing them over to local families, where's the Green Party been? Campaigning against 100% affordable housing because it might damage homeowners' views, voting against new affordable housing, and in Councillor Elliott's case, trying to physically obstruct workers in the middle of a pandemic. That is not an agenda that we want to work with, and it's not an agenda we will work with. Those are not the actions of a party that is serious about the housing crisis. Those are the actions of a party that, in Councillor Ainsley's eminently quotable words, believes that there is no housing crisis. This Green motion tonight has given us a chance to debate homelessness and to talk more about it, and for that I am grateful. We often hear an awful lot from views for those who are well housed and have housing security. The question then is what we do about the problem. And this Green motion, as we've already heard from Councillor Kay, Councillor Hashi, is contemptuous in the shallowness of its thought. It's facile, the failure to truly grapple with the enormity of this crisis, or even indeed, in Councillor Ainsley's view, to deny it even exists. Now I wish, as I'm sure everyone here for however long they've been a councillor wishes, that throughout my time as a councillor that we could have done more to tackle the levels of, thank you very much Madam Mayor, the levels of homelessness in this borough. We all recognise in those people that they are our neighbours and our friends. The answer to that solution is to build more homes, not the political window dressing that this motion represents. Lambeth Labour is serious about this housing crisis. Unlike the Greens, we recognise that it exists. And unlike the Greens, we're determined to do something about it. Vote the motion down.
Councillor Tim Briggs, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I thank...
Sorry, I wish to make a point of personal clarification, if I may, Mayor. Constitution where I can do this, I'm happy to do so.
Well, can I just say that it should have been done at the time, and we want to move on to listen to Councillor Briggs.
We've been told this at the time, if someone stops speaking, then you...
Sorry? Just bear with me, as you know, this is the first time I've done one of these, so I'm going to consult.
So Councillor Bennett finished, and then Councillor Briggs started speaking. So it's in between those times that the point should have been raised.
Right, so right.
Proceed with Councillor.
My advice has been to proceed with Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We got advice that we should wait for the person to finish speaking and then make our point forward.
Yes, please. Sorry, can I just let my colleague speak?
Councillor, the point of any point of order should be raised when it arises. Absolutely, after Councillor Bennett spoke, then the point of order should have been raised. But the Mayor moved on to Councillor Briggs, he started speaking, and then the point of order was raised. That's the issue.
Just to clear up this point, I'm very happy to.
So, Councillor Briggs.
Should the chair wish? Should the mayor wish?
Okay.
Thank you. Part 3, Rule 15.5 of the Constitution says that if a member is misrepresented or misquoted by another councillor, they have the point. They are allowed to make a personal point of personal explanation, and that's what I will do. Councillor Bennett repeatedly chooses to always misrepresent Green councillors, and you've misrepresented me 3 times this evening. I said there was not necessarily a housing crisis, there was an affordability crisis, which you are compounding, and you know full well. So I will not sit here, and I will not allow my colleagues anymore to be misquoted, misrepresented. It's also a breach of the Members' Code of Conduct. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now move in to Councillor Briggs.
Madam Mayor, can I make a point of personal clarification, as I've been accused of misrepresenting? I'll be very quick. Let's go with this, shall we?
We don't have a housing crisis.
We don't have a housing crisis. Begin quote, end of. We don't have a housing crisis, is what they're saying. If you don't,
Can I ask for some order, please? Sorry, can we control this meeting? Can I control this meeting? Can you please? Can we move on to Councillor Tim Briggs? Excuse me. Can you bring some order to this meeting? Sorry, I'm not either side. Can we just lay this now? Moving to Councillor Tim Briggs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
3 minutes.
So I thank Green colleagues for this motion. I think this is an important and a timely motion. I don't think that, as Councillor Bennett said, I don't think it's a facile motion at all. There's the question of building new homes, and that's the long-term solution. But there's also the question raised, very importantly, in this motion, about the quality of temporary accommodation in Lambeth. And I think perhaps Councillor Bennett doesn't like looking in the mirror and seeing what the quality of temporary accommodation in Lambeth is. And perhaps that's why he's so resistant to having a motion about this. Councillor Bennett said for the second time tonight, he said that there were 30,000 people on the waiting list. But of course, what he never says is that no one's actually been removed from the said waiting list since 2014. So of course it keeps going up and up. And he loves to repeat the statistic. And I would just say, it's a bit, as Danny Dyer would say, Councillor Bennett, it's a bit naughty. It's a bit naughty to use that statistic because you know that no one gets taken off it. So I would just say to you, just perhaps don't use it as much as you do. Councillor Elliott said that he talked about the miserable standards of temporary accommodation, and he said that they were embarrassing and shameful. And I'm sure that those of us who have been involved in trying to settle someone in temporary accommodation are aware of quite how poor some of the temporary accommodation in Lambeth really is. So I was involved with a guy who was looking to be put in temporary accommodation by the council, and he had some mental health needs, and he went to a particular property and he said he could not stay there. He said if the choice is between going there and sleeping on the street, then he said he would rather sleep on the street. So fortunately, there were some very good officers working in temporary accommodation who managed to find him another place to stay, and that place was much higher standard. Which is why I've put in my amendment, which I know you won't agree with lots of what I say in my amendment, but there's one or two points that I just want to reiterate in my amendment, which I think are helpful to the debate. I've said that we should establish a routine inspection team inspecting across all of temporary accommodation. Now, I know there will be, obviously, inspections of temporary accommodation. But what I think is really important is that we drive up standards of temporary accommodation. And you say to landlords, I can guarantee you that if landlords are offering the council temporary accommodation, they will bite the council's hand off to keep doing that because it's easy money for them. So you can drive up standards without thinking that landlords are going to leave and that then you'll have a crisis because you'll have to send people in temporary accommodation out of the borough. You can drive up, you are very keen on driving up standards in the private rented sector, do it in temporary accommodation as well.
Thank you.
I have no more time, so that's it.
Thank you. Moving on now to Councillor Nicole Griffiths, who has 5 minutes to close this debate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Over the past 3 years, members of the Green Group have met with each Cabinet member, Strategic Director and Director for Housing to address the same issues. Retrofitting, not demolition. The immediate need for more council housing at council rent and secure tenancies. Homelessness, and what will the council be doing to end the use of temporary accommodation? There's a common phrase. Many of us are just two pay packets away from homelessness. Any one of us could find ourselves in that situation. 24 years ago, penniless and alone with a baby not yet a year old, I found myself without a home. we were incredibly fortunate, receiving help from family and friends to find accommodation, and from there I could rebuild my life. I've met dozens of lone mums with their children who do not have the network that I had to support them through the most difficult of times. Homelessness with children, where it's near impossible to go to work or get children to school, and the financial pressures. What you need more than anything is a secure home and supportive help. Without that network, families are obliged to look to the council for help. Over the past few years, I've visited families in living in accommodation that is so unsuitable for human habitation that I have despaired alongside them. Today, I received images from one mum illustrating the leaking ceiling above her bed that has been flagged for repair for over a year alongside the flooding in her kitchen. She was placed here 4 years ago by the council, and the property manager continually refuses to get the necessary work done, or says he has when he hasn't, because it doesn't get inspected. Why is he not being held to account by housing officers on the tenant's behalf? There have been occasions where officers have done all they can to improve conditions for families in substandard temporary accommodation. For example, the refurbishment of the hostel in our ward is very, very welcome. But why did it take councillor interference for this to happen? Why were the pleas of residents ignored for so long? We know for each family that contacts us, there are many more who don't. In the deputation, we heard about the appalling conditions and the inhumane treatment of families at Denby Court. Most concerning is the description of the indifferent attitude shown to the plight of these families, with members and officers stating the line, as they have tonight, that there is nothing they can do due to lack of housing. So isn't it time for something to be done? Where is the administration's housing strategy that is so desperately needed to tackle the shortage of council homes at council rent with secure tenancies, which addresses the 3,000 families who are in temporary accommodation? It's not Homes for Lambeth, that goes without saying, as it is not the vehicle needed to respond to this current need. We need a strategy that includes the provision of truly affordable homes to rent, a council that holds itself to account as landlords by acting as property agents where accommodation is being accessed from private landlords, who in turn must be held to account for the condition of the properties that they own or manage, and use the legislation that exists to do so. Everyone deserves to live in a decent home, dry, free of vermin, comfortable, secure and truly affordable. We cannot claim to be a child-friendly borough that puts the needs of children first when thousands are living in unacceptable circumstances without the respect or dignity that is their human right. So, Councillor Bennett and anyone else who thinks otherwise, this Green Group, through our wider policies, alternative budget, words and deeds, have always shown that we are truly committed to the provision of a plentiful number of council homes available at council rent and secure tenancy agreements. What we can't support is a Homes for Lambeth business plan where only a handful of additional council homes will be made available to our Lambeth residents over the next 20 years. And let's be honest, affordable housing is for people who earn over £60,000 a year.
30 seconds.
This lack of strategy is letting down some of the most vulnerable residents of our borough. The administration refuses to hold itself to account and then shoots us down when we do so. This is so important. Inequality, deprivation, childhood trauma, child poverty, as any social scientist will tell you, are inextricably interlinked with housing provision. We need to get the housing right, financial support where needed, remove the endless insecurity and impact on well-being that temporary housing and substandard housing of all kinds unarguably has. As landlords, council needs to hold itself to account and maintain all its properties to an acceptable standard. It needs to use the available legislation to hold private landlords to account. They can't be fined tens of thousands of pounds through the courts, money they would then go to the council.
The time has finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.